ago. It was because I had the AirPod in. I wasn't even paying attention to that, so I apologize for that. So to make up for it, I'm gonna do another video for you guys because it just sounds like I'm kind of speaking like in a stadium, which, for lack of better words, I thought since the topic was on work, you know, um, it would make sense, to kind of speak as if I'm speaking from like a stadium, from a stadium perspective. Um, so I want to talk a little bit to you guys about living a value driven life. All right. A value driven life. This is really very much connected to the discussion on workplace dynamics. Because a lot of times when you're applying for a job, you get anxious, you get nervous. And when you're really nervous and anxious about the outcome of getting that job, a lot of times, that's related to the job not fully being aligned with your value system. When something is aligned with your value system and you're just sure that this is a job, that reflects your principles, you're nervous and you're anxious, but there's not as much fear, right? You're just kind of like, if it's meant for me, it's meant for me. But when that application, right, and you're biting your nails and this outcome dependent, right? It's like, if I don't get this job, I'm a failure. I'm not good enough. What's meant for you will come to you. All right. Believe that. So outcome independent living is the quiet rebellion against a culture addicted to assurance. It is a decision to act from values rather than forecast, to move from truth rather than comfort. When your sense of self is tied to outcomes, every decision becomes a gamble for safety, approval, or control. But when you are outcome independent, you stop asking, will this work? And you will start asking, is this aligned? That shift changes everything. Alignment does not promise ease, applause, or immediate results. It promises integrity, and integrity has weight. It steadies you when outcomes wobble, when plans unravel, and when life refuses to cooperate. Assurance seeks guarantees before obedience. Values move first and let meaning catch up later. It's so important for us as young Black men to have core values. This is, again, a lot of reason why we end up in jobs that are not in our best interest, is because when you don't make a decision aligned with your value system and you look for a job or you look for a place of employment based off of how you feel, like, I feel like this might be good, Randy. I feel like this might be a good opportunity. It looks good, or what you think. A lot of times that creates more anxiety and depression when decisions are born out of, misalignment to your boundary system. Your values point to your boundaries. If I know what's important to me, what has meaning, what's priority, more than likely I'm going to have rules around what's okay and what's not okay. All right. It's so important to stay connected to your value system, to your core values, right? When you're not aligned with your values, you tend to be guided by the value system of other people. All right. You got to stay firm in your boundaries. Don't be afraid to stick to what's true to you, what's true to who you are, what is, sort of key to you being your authentic self. It's your value system. All right. It's very important. When you're going to a job interview, it's not just about the job interviewing you. You should be interviewing that job, right? Is this a company that's aligned with my value of respect? That's important to me. Fairness, equity, right? Fair pay. Are people getting along? Can you kind of, if you want to just focus on your work, can you focus on your work, or are you penalized, right? If those are values to you, that should be honored just as much as you're honoring that company's values, or it's not going to work. You're going to end up leaving, right? That's what burnout is when you commit to either a person, a company, or an experience that's misaligned with your values. You're setting yourself up for burnout, right? You're going to be exhausted because you're doing something that's not allowing you to be who you are authentically. So you tend to become outcome dependent. Even in relationships, as a young man, you're looking for a girl, right? You just got to have a relationship so bad because your life would be so much better, right? And then you rushed into a relationship with somebody you haven't explored if her value system align with your value system. You don't even know what your value system is, right? You just go for how you think. When you don't have a clear awareness of your values, you're basically making decisions off of how you think and how you feel, right? Man, she makes me feel good, right? She say I look good. She say, everything's all right, right? And then you end up in a relationship, right? in the beginning, it gets that spark, right? And then over time, you're just kind of like, yeah, this is kind of a drag. All right. So you always want to make sure your value systems are aligned, right? Is this relationship aligned with my boundary system? You know, and this is what it says: alignment does not promise ease, applause, or immediate results. It promises integrity, and integrity has weight. It steadies you when outcomes start to kind of wobble, right? The plans unravel and when life refuses to cooperate. Assurance seeks guarantees before obedience. Values move first and let meaning catch up later. At the center of this posture is a simple, often avoided truth: I can survive disappointment. All right. You got to keep telling yourself, I can survive disappointment. Most fear is not about failure itself, but about the belief that disappointment will undo you. Yet disappointment is not a death sentence, it is a passage. When you trust that you can survive it, you no longer bargain with fear or chase reassurance from circumstances. You stop outsourcing peace to results and begin anchoring it in conviction. Living aligned with values means accepting that outcomes may bruise you without breaking you. Assurance says, protect me from pain. Values say, I will walk through pain without abandoning who I am. And that is where real strength is formed, not in the absence of disappointment, but in the refusal to let it dictate your direction. When you're not anchored in your core value system, I can't say this enough, you become outcome driven. You start basing your worthiness, your value, your peace off of external circumstances. You become led by the value systems of other people in the situation. This is why a lot of times, a lot of cultures and different races, like a lot of you black guys like different cultures and races, which is fine. I'm married to a Chinese woman, so who the fuck am I to say anything, right? So, but they're ran by different value systems, right? What they might prioritize, we may minimize, right? What we might prioritize, they may minimize, right? And you see this constantly and constantly where black men get in situations with different cultures, and even in your own culture with women, where you're led by your money, right? You're led by how you look and your strength, and how strong you are, right? And then that may not be as important to her, right? It may be a value, but it may not be necessarily a core value, right? Maybe you're led because you're the best rapper in the county, right? Maybe you're the fucking number one actor in the state, right? But maybe that may not be a value for her. Maybe that may not be a priority for her, right? You're led by pride in your black identity, right? You're proud to be black, right? You're connected to your history, your FBA, your ADOS, but maybe that may not be a value for her. Maybe that might not be a priority for her, right? And over time, you'll start noticing in your decisions, right? Your reactions, right? Things you commit to, things you don't commit to, your emotional reactions, your thoughts, right? There's a misalignment there. You start having all these conflicts, and all conflicts are is just exposure or highlights of the value misalignment. Damn, this thing ain't as important to her like I thought it was. You know, I thought she valued me. I thought I was a man. I thought all that other shit was on the side, right? So and then over time, and you see this a lot in like younger interracial relationships where they're just so enamored by novelty, right? Oh my God, I wonder how this black guy is. I wonder how the Puerto Rican girls and Mexican girls and white girls are. But you haven't really thought about the values that you guys share, right? You could be from different cultures and different races, but if it's all about how you feel and how you look, more than likely you're gonna separate eventually, and you know who you're gonna end up with at the end of the day? People who are aligned with your value system. You see this shit all the time. So really important to just, go on Google. You don't even need to go on Google. Just write a list of your values. What are things that are important to you? Right? Maybe it's important to you to have a little space when you go to bed at night. You don't want to be smothered. Maybe it's a value for you to get open communication, to be transparent, to be honest. Right? It just depends on whatever it is that, for you, you'll know what your core value is based off of what triggers you when people don't meet that need or that value, right? So sometimes if you don't know, like, damn, how am I going to find out what my values is, Randy? Ask yourself what triggers you, right? What kind of irks you that people do, more than likely because there's a value misalignment, right? Something like that. So it says for Black youth, especially young Black men, Pain often arrives before language. Discrimination, misinterpretation, and hostility are experienced long before a young person has the internal framework to organize what those experiences really mean. Without a deeper system to place these emotions into, anger, shame, fear, and self doubt can feel like proof of identity rather than temporary psychological states. Core values provide a stabilizing architecture, something larger, right? When you're not guided by your value system, you're a teenage boy, you might be in experiences where you feel like you're getting bullied or you feel like life is beating you down. And those emotions, because right, life is 10% of what happens to you, right? And 90% of how you react to it. So when those experiences are kind of beating you down, life is kind of hammering you, your feelings and your thoughts feel like they're the biggest thing in the room, right? It's all about how I think and how I feel. And I feel, and right? Your feelings are valid. Don't get me wrong, but as a young man, you need to be guided by principle, right? Your principles take the larger framework. If you have a value of faith, but life is beating your ass down, right? You gotta put your faith, you gotta put those emotions and those thoughts, that negative stinking thinking in the framework of your faith, right? What does God say? Who does God say you are? Right? What does the scripture say? Right? If you're really anchored in your faith, what is your mentor? What is your pastor? What does your family say? Right? What are some scriptures? Right? What are some words of wisdom? Right? That should be bigger, right? Than those temporary negative thoughts and feelings, right? You need to realign. But what you see, a lot of young dudes don't know what their value system are. So when they have those feelings and those thoughts attacking them and, telling them, yeah, man, go beat that motherfucker up. Yeah, go rob him. Go get that get back, man. Right. And then you're sitting in jail or you're dealing with some type of consequences. And then you're thinking like, damn, I should have did. Right. It's a quote that says, when I violate my value system, I should myself and I feel guilty. When others violate my value system, I should them and I feel angry. Right. So pay attention to that. What are your principles? Who are you allowing to define you? What are you allowing? What principles or experiences or concepts are you allowing to define who you are? All right. So it says core values provide a stabilizing architecture, something larger, deeper, and more permanent than passing thoughts or feelings. They allow you to say, this emotion is real, but it is not who I am. Okay. Hatred and discrimination are not random forces, they are expressions of other people's value systems. You see that? When Black youth are exposed to racism, contempt, or dehumanization, they are encountering beliefs that were formed long before them and have nothing to do with their worth. Without clearly defined values of their own, young people are vulnerable to absorbing these external narratives as internal truths. Core values create a psychological firewall, separating what is happening to you from who you are choosing to be. Defining values is an act of self authorship. When Black youth identify how they will show up as men of integrity, discipline, compassion, courage, self respect, or faith, they interrupt the world's attempt to define them through stereotypes or projections. The responsibilities is on us, Black men, young Black men. All right. We can sit and point the finger at the environment, at the condition all day until our damn hand fall off. But at the end of the day, what's going to make the change is you deciding who you are and what you're going to commit and align to moving forward. You're going the condition can't force you to act. It's up to you to make a choice, right? Yes, the conditions matter. Yes, it's valid, but we just can't sit there fucking crying about the environment all damn day, right? You have to decide what's going to be the foundation and the groundwork that you're going to launch from, right? It's up to you. You got Black folks who come from ghetto ass neighborhoods and environments in the suburbs where maybe they were the only Black folk and they were getting beat up and they still took off, right? Became super successful, super influential. And a lot of times those real harsh circumstances, in some cases, produce some of the best folks. It's how life is. It could be backwards and shit. You're thinking, man, I'm in this shitty situation, Randy. Life is whooping my ass. I'm a piece of shit, right? And a lot of times those situations make some of the best characters, right? You'd be surprised how life works. So defining your values as an act of self authorship, right? Values shift identity from reaction to intention. Instead of being shaped by hostility, Black youth began shaping their responses. This shift is not about denial of injustice. It is about refusing to let injustice dictate your self concept. All of this is an identity game. That's all this is. All these situations, all these circumstances, all that stuff that's going on is an identity game. Who are you choosing to be? Right? Are you going to be the reactor? Life is doing all this shit at you. You just, a puppet master? Or are you going to be led by intention? Right? Hey, life is throwing all this at me. I'm still going to be bigger than this. I'm better than you guys. Right? And it's not about being arrogant or being prideful, but I know better. I can think better. I can think higher, right? In line with God's word, right? That's what it's about. This is all about identity, right? Reframe your experience as people are out here living according to their belief system, which is anchored in their value system. What's important? If faith is a value, then I'm going to have a belief, all things work out for my good. Greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. Right? Your beliefs, the things that you're thinking are a product of your value system, right? Really important to think about it. Your values are like everything. Can't tell you how many clients I'm working with in therapy, and that's the first thing I go to. I'm like, "Have you guys discussed your core values? Have you talked about that?" No, we ain't really talk about that. I'm like, "What the fuck? What y'all doing?" And that's like the main starting point of counseling is identifying your core value system. I'm telling you, you therapists ain't asking people what the value system is. You're not doing any damn work. All right. That's where a lot of this stuff begins, right? Who defines you? What are you defining your identity as? Right? Core values also function as boundaries. They become internal markers that determine what is allowed access to the mind, body, and future. You see how important this is? These core values are your boundaries. What, it's going to determine what has access in my life, what jobs, what people, what social groups, right? What music I listen to, what opportunities I take, right? What things I do, right? Not every opportunity is aligned with who you are, Black man. Not every friendship is safe. Not every feeling deserves obedience. Ask yourself, is this feeling, if I act off of this, they call emotions action urges in psychology. If I act off of this fucking feeling, is it going to produce a value driven behavior, right? Am I going to show up as a man of faith, a man of discipline if I react off of this rage? Okay. Not every opportunity is aligned. Not every friendship is safe. Not every feeling deserves obedience. When values are clear, decisions become clearer, not easier, but cleaner. In a world that constantly pressures Black youth to perform, conform, or survive at any cost, values offer a grounded center from which to move forward with clarity and self respect. So it's not going to be easy, all right? This is not about easy. Don't think like, okay, Randy, I made a decision off of I committed to an action off of my value of discipline and of my value of respect and faith. But why isn't it easy, Randy? Why am I still struggling? Why is it so hard? Because sometimes things that are worthwhile, right, in the long term are not going to be the fucking easiest. If shit is coming at you so easy early on, right, it's going to be easy to leave your ass, right? But at least you can, if you find yourself, and I'm not saying you gotta, suffer, but sometimes aligning with your value systems might take some suffering, right? Jesus Christ came on earth and he lived a value driven life. Was he suffer free? His whole life was driven by his value system and he suffered. So that's a picture right there. Hey, when you're aligning to what, who you want to show up as, right? And what's important to you, you might suffer a little bit. All right. Very, very, very important to think about that. You know, I can't stress this conversation about values enough. I've probably made like 5 videos about it, you know. So core values separate or they create separation between identity and emotion. Your core values create separation between your identity and your temporary fleeting feelings. All right. Core values help Black youth understand that emotions are temporary states, not permanent identities. Anger, sadness, fear, or discouragement often arise in response to injustice, but values allow these emotions to be placed within a larger framework rather than becoming the framework itself. A young man who values dignity and self control can feel rage without becoming destructive. Values give emotions context, preventing them from hijacking your identity. Without values, your emotions become your directors and directives. Youth may feel angry and believe they are angry people. They may feel unwanted and conclude they are unwanted. Values interrupt this fusion by anchoring identity to chosen principles rather than passing internal experiences. This is why a lot of times Black dudes go down the wrong path. It's because they allow their temporary feelings to become who I am. I am this anger, Randy. This person fucking pissed me off. I am pissed off, right? You hear people say that. I am pissed off. I am angry. I am mad as hell, right? And then you want to show up and wear that costume if you want to, and look where it takes you, right? To the path of destruction, lost opportunities. 30, 40 years, you're looking back, you're like, damn, man, I should have thought differently. I should have behaved differently, right? When values are not defined, emotions feel overwhelming and absolute. Thoughts are treated as facts rather than signals. Identity becomes reactive instead of intentional. Values protect against internalizing hatred and discrimination. Hatred is never neutral, it always carries belief systems. When Black youth encounters racism, they are encountering someone else's values expressed through fear, ignorance, or power. Core values allow youth to recognize this belief does not belong to me. Instead of absorbing contempt, they can reject it without denial or retaliation. Values such as self respect, truth, and justice help youth locate discrimination externally rather than internalizing it. This preserves mental health and self worth while still acknowledging reality. When values are not defined, external hatred becomes your internal dialogue. Youth begin to police themselves. Shame and self doubt quietly take root. Values create psychological distance from negative thoughts. Negative thoughts are inevitable, especially in environments shaped by inequality. Core values create distance between the thinker and the thought. A young man can notice a thought like, I'm not good enough, and measure it against values such as growth, perseverance, or faith. This comparison weakens the authority of the thought. Values become the measuring stick, not the emotion. Over time, youth learn that they don't have to agree with every thought that they have. When values are not defined, negative thoughts feel convincing and personal. Self talk becomes self judgment. Mental health deteriorates quietly. Values act as internal boundaries. Core values functions as internal lines in the sand. They determine what behavior is acceptable, what treatment is tolerated, and what compromises are off limit. For Black youth navigating unsafe or exploitive environments, this internal boundary system is protective. Values help youth say no without apology. They reduce exposure to harm by guiding decisions before consequences arrive. When values are not defined, boundaries are inconsistent or non existent. Youth tolerate disrespect, and then the harmful patterns repeat themselves. Values filter friendships and social influences. Not every connection is alignment. Core values help Black youth assess friendships based on direction, not familiarity. Values like accountability, honesty, and growth highlight which relationships nourish and which drain. This discernment reduces peer pressure and prevents loyalty to relationships that sabotage your progress. When values are not defined, belonging is prioritized over your well being. Youth remain in harmful friendships out of fear of isolation, and your growth is delayed. Values reduce vulnerability to harmful opportunities. Many harmful opportunities are disguised as shortcuts, fast money, validation, or status. Core values expose the hidden cost. A young man grounded in integrity, right? Say, for example, a young man has a value of integrity. This is important to him. And long term vision can recognize when an opportunity violates his future. Right? Values shift focus from immediate relief to sustainable outcomes. When values are not defined, impulsive and impulse overrides foresight. Short term gains lead to long term consequences. Regret replaces intention. Values help youth choose response over reaction. Discrimination often provokes reaction. Values create the pause. They allow youth to choose responses that align with who they are, becoming, not what they are feeling in the moment. This preserves dignity and agency even in hostile environments. When values are not defined, reactions escalate conflict. Youth feel controlled by their feelings. Situations worsen unnecessarily. All right. So choosing your value system and your core values are so important. I pray that this message reaches who is meant to reach and that you're able to spend some time exploring your core value system. That's where your power is, your ability to align with principles that determine who you are and who you're becoming versus temporary circumstances and feelings and negative thoughts that are a product of conditions. All right. Hope you guys have a blessed day, man. Peace.